Welcome to the Metamorphosis Project Podcast. I'm your host, Tina Gilbertson, and this is a space where transformation begins. Here, we dive deep into energy healing, self-care, and the power of mindset to help you break free from old patterns and design a life that feels aligned, vibrant, and authentically you. Each week, we explore the tools, techniques, and real-life experience that guide us toward lasting healing and growth. Because true metamorphosis isn't just about change. It's about becoming who you were always meant to be. Now, let's get into this week's conversation. Welcome back to the Metamorphosis Project Podcast. And today we have a guest that I have been so excited waiting for her to come on, Tina Gilbertson. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to come on and share your wisdom with us.
Oh, it's a great pleasure, Tenya. I'm so excited to talk with you.
Great. So before we get things started, we're going to break the ice a little bit. And so the icebreaker question I have for you is, what are the two most important things for people to be happy, in your opinion?
Wow, that's huge.
It's very different for everybody, though, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess it would be. And that's a wonderful question. I haven't really thought about that. So let's see what I come up with off the cuff. Um, I guess self-acceptance, feeling comfortable in our own skin is probably, if we don't have that, it's pretty hard to be happy.
Yeah.
And maybe connection to other humans. Or
Absolutely.
yeah.
Those are great. Those are, and I think there's so many more than just two, right? There's different ways to bring happiness into our lives, to cultivate that happiness.
Yeah.
And I was kind of elated when I pulled the question out of the box, because I think that everything happens for a reason, and then the universe lines things up. You wrote the book Constructive Wallowing um, to help people understand how to feel their quote unquote bad feelings. Um, One thing that I have learned and it's only been over the last probably 4 or 5 years when my healing journey really kind of started, was to try not to put too much of a label on my feelings, on my emotions. Um, and that really kind of helped me in a sense to kind of look at them from a different perspective. Um, but your book, bringing in the truth of the book, the truth um
Technique.
process. Yes, thank you. Technique let me see that even though I was having these feelings that I wasn't trying to label, um, that having them and allowing myself to feel them was not a bad thing. Um, right. It wasn't so much that they were bad feelings. It was that, sometimes they really make our bodies feel uncomfortable. And the grief process allows us to move through that uncomfortability. Is that how I'm understanding it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I went through this process myself too. I had to learn that bad feelings, for one thing, they may feel bad physically and emotionally, but they didn't mean that I was bad for having them. But, I think a lot of the bad feeling that we experience when we're sad or angry or remorseful, anything like that, a lot of it is, I feel like it's stigma, like something is very wrong, that this is a bad thing that's happening right now. How do I get past this? Some of it is probably hardwired. We are kind of wired to seek safety and pleasure and move away from danger and threat and discomfort. To some degree, it's just a natural kind of wiring. So we don't want to feel bad. But there's also the social stigma of, if I'm feeling like I hate someone right now, does that make me a hateful person? If I'm feeling angry, am I an angry person? So, yeah, that's another layer of suffering on top of the bad.
It really is. And when I started to get into
because when I grew up with a parent who was diagnosed as being bipolar when I was 7 or 8 years old,
Mm.
and she was 28 at the time, and which I think back going, "Oh my gosh, she's the same age my oldest daughter is now," and I can't imagine having to process that diagnosis at any age. Um, but she was also taking care of 4 children, and it was a lot. And so for her to try to navigate that and also explain to the 4 of us kids what was going on, the capacity to do that just wasn't there. And she didn't have neither of my parents had the ability to show us kids what it meant to have feelings because they weren't shown that. And that's one thing I've really noticed is that we have to be able to teach our kids how to have emotions, how to allow them to process. And but we can't teach them unless we know.
Right.
Um but I'm so thankful that I've been able to learn this in the past few years because even though my kids are adults, I can still teach them how to have their feelings, and they are learning quite quickly that it's okay to have their feelings.
Great.
Um, so, in my world, in the energy world, when we don't feel emotions, they tend to get stuck.
In my world too.
Yeah, and um, that creates physical problems as well when we don't feel or allow past emotions to come up.
Right.
How do
You
you how do you assist someone? Because with me, it's just about moving the energy through. Is that how it works as well when past emotions come up? Or does it matter whether you know whether they're from childhood emotions or not, just allowing them to come up to clear?
I think that sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I'm done. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's a really, clever distinction you're making there when you're talking about, how do we, allow those feelings to move through, and do we need to really know originally what they were about? And I think the answer is no. I think you and I are probably, quite on the same page about the need to just allow what's there to be there and to move through. And what that looks like, in my world, which is a kind of a more therapy based world, is for people to have the feelings that they're having physically. If it's tears that they're going to have, it's tears. If there's a lot of energy moving through, they may need to punch a pillow or scream or kick something inanimate and hopefully soft. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, the feelings need to come out, and I'm interested in people's childhoods experiences, but I don't require that people. A lot of people don't remember their childhoods very well, and that's often because of a focus on survival, emotional survival, or physical survival. That doesn't really allow the laying down of lots of memories of birthday parties and other kids and ponies and teachers and stuff. That doesn't, memories don't form readily in an atmosphere of stress and danger. And the danger might be emotional. It may not be always physical, but sometimes it is. And so a lot of people can't remember their childhoods, and it's not necessary to recall where your fear might have come in or whatever. A lot of times, what people might experience is depression, and that can be just a natural result of having had to suppress so many emotions for so long. The our machinery kind of gums up and starts to break down, and that's how I think of depression, as just being a gumming up of the emotional machinery. And as you've noted, you don't feel anything. You don't feel happy, and you don't feel exactly sad. It's just a depression. So it's enough, I think, to know that something's gotten gummed up. Maybe there have been too many emotions, and it's time to allow the body and the mind, which I personally think are exactly the same thing, to safely release some of what's happened.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it's funny because, I've met with a lot of other people who have gone through healing journeys, and there's a point that they come to in their childhood where they don't have memories before a certain age, and so that validates a lot of what we've been through. That there just isn't space for survival and memories,
Yeah.
which is very interesting. Um, so can you take us through for the listeners what the truth process is?
Sure. So the truth technique is just a mnemonic. It's a way of remembering to do certain things when you are having a strong feeling that's usually a feeling that's troubling. You're probably not going to do this when you're feeling elated, because those feelings, those good feelings, just move right through on their own, and there's not really an issue. So the truth techniques, the TRUTH stands for 5 different parts of the steps of the process. The first is tell yourself the situation. What's happening right now? What is it? What's going on? And it might just be, I'm having feelings and I don't know why. Or it might be somebody said something and I'm feeling strongly about it, or something happened. Okay, so tell yourself the situation in a sentence or two. Okay, this is what happened. The R is realize what you're feeling. This is the kind of emotional literacy step, which is labeling the feeling with a feeling word. Anger, remorse, shame, dread. Either you might be feeling a lot of different things, but there's maybe a hot button right at the moment. There's one that's standing out, and you can say it's mostly what I feel is shame or humiliation or something. And then the U in truth stands for uncover self-criticism. This is the kind of the piece where we judge ourselves to the point where if we're having a cry, it's not a good cry. It's going to be a cry that doesn't make us feel better. Self-criticism might look like, I'm looking at this wrong, or I'm too sensitive, or you know, questioning the feeling that is already there and maybe judging yourself for having it. So we want to uncover any critical, self-critical, or judgmental thoughts about ourselves in this moment of where we're having these feelings. Okay. So, and then the next step, once we've uncovered that, is to try to understand ourselves. That's the second T in truth. Try to understand yourself. Well, and the question here is, why would a good person feel exactly the same way that I feel right now?
Mm.
Why might a good person be angry here? Well, find a reason to say, well, okay, that makes sense. That's why I'm angry. Maybe there's been an injustice or something feels unfair. That's often a reason for anger. Or maybe someone has put us in a position where we have to set a boundary we didn't want to set, and so we're mad at them. That's something that I've certainly felt myself, like, oh, why are they putting me in that position? So it becomes about anger when really it's about something else. It's more fear of doing the wrong thing, or um, making somebody mad at us. So we try to understand why we're feeling the way we do. We don't have to change how we're feeling, or, swap that for a positive feeling. Just try to understand, oh, that's why this is here. And then the H in truth is just a reminder to have the feeling. It's one thing to think about our feelings and label our feelings and look at our feelings out of the corner of our eyes, over our shoulders or something, but it's another to fully have the feeling. And this isn't something you necessarily want to do at work, or, when the time isn't good. You might want to have some privacy, but somewhere, somehow, either alone or with someone you trust, it's important to have the feeling and that's going to happen in your body and your mind and your heart all at the same time. So you know what it is you're feeling, you name it, You remove any criticism of yourself for having it, and you allow the feeling to move through you. And that's exactly what it will do.
That's awesome. These steps, once you start practicing them, um, uh, they flow so easily. What makes it difficult for somebody to start taking these steps that you found in general? Like, why is it so hard for some people to take that step to learn to feel their feelings? Because I think a lot of us, like we said before, really don't understand what it means to feel our feelings because we've stuffed things down so much. Um, because anxiety is not fun, sadness isn't fun, shame, guilt, all those feelings are not fun to feel. So how can they take that step, maybe not a so scary step in moving forward to do this process?
Yeah, let's start by acknowledging some of the many things that make it difficult. I mean, you mentioned already it doesn't feel good. So that in itself makes it difficult. But also, there's so much conditioning from the time we're very small to not have our feelings, to not really examine them and explore them and stand up for them, but really we're conditioned to quote unquote let go of them as quickly as possible because feelings are not uncomfortable just for us, but for others as well. Other people don't like it when we're frustrated, when we're angry, or when we're sad. It's inconvenient for other people. And to some extent, I have to say that to some extent that can't be helped. I mean, part of the role of parenting and guiding children and everything has to do with containing some of their experience and redirecting and so on. So it's just not it's just an unfortunate fact of life that we do get conditioned socially to suppress our feelings. So we're not convinced that it is truly okay to feel the way we do. And another thing that does makes us not convinced is this confusion between feelings and behavior. So if I say it's okay to be angry, does that mean it's okay to hit somebody or to scream at the top of your lungs? Um, so behavior and feelings are often conflated, and people mistakenly think if I allow myself to be angry, that means that I might hurt someone or myself. But feelings are all okay and harmless. Behavior is not. Behavior is a choice. Behavior can be judged. That's not true for feelings. Behavior can be immoral. Feelings cannot be. So behavior and feelings, we need to decouple those and just experiment with feeling something on the inside and not acting out. Anytime you're in public, you're at the airport and you're feeling something, you're not necessarily acting it out. So we all mostly have practice feeling things inside and not acting it out.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think I love how you bring that up to kind of separate those because a lot of people can't separate them.
Yeah.
I think we can be angry without, like you said, having to scream or yell. But I think a lot of people see that as stuffing down.
Right. Because we don't know a lot of alternative ways of expressing strong feelings. Most of us don't grow up in environments where people are expressing anger in, what we would call healthy ways. I grew up in a household where if somebody was angry, they would yell. So all of us yelled whenever we were angry. That's what angry people do, is what I learned. We yell, we raise our voices. Other people grow up in homes where they never see anger. There's never a word spoken. So anger, it must be very frightening if it's not allowed at all to show its face. And then still other people do grow up in households, unfortunately, where anger is frightening and dangerous, and people get hurt when there's anger. So, not having an alternative is seems like the problem.
Yeah.
And it's such a kind of a conundrum because we have to be, you point out that a lot of people can't necessarily separate emotions from feelings. And that is something that is learned, children, when we're born, we can't separate behavior from feelings. That's something we learn socially. Um, but if we don't learn that socially, then we may be 50 years old and still acting out.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
an area of development.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and I think that's where having to reparent ourselves sometimes comes in, and having to take that step to read books, to go to therapy, to learn new ways of expressing how we're feeling. We have to take the reins and take responsibility for our own feelings, our own behavior, and learn what our own emotions are.
Yeah, and you know what makes that hard, I think, is I think there's often an acknowledged or an unrealized sense of powerlessness. Like we don't feel that we have the ability to change our lives for the better, or or and I think that comes from having been children, and when we pretty much were powerless. We are treated as people who need to be guided and have things done for us for, let's say 18 years. And then all of a sudden, we're thrown out into the world and told, well, it's your life, you've got to make decisions and it's all up to you now. So it's kind of a rude awakening and a shock. And some of us don't really get the memo that we do have power. See, that's conditioning as well. Powerlessness is to some degree conditioned in, um, unless parents are extremely focused on making sure that their kids are are not feeling powerless. As they get
Right.
older and older, they get more and more responsibility and so on. But not everyone is able to has the time or the knowledge or the resources to do that.
Yeah, exactly. And I want to point out, from my experience, it's the knowledge, not having the knowledge to be able to pass on. When I work with clients, often we talk about forgiveness of the environments that we grew up in.
Yeah.
And I try to tell them, look, the environment that you grew up in, what happened to you when you were a kid was not your fault.
Yep.
It is, you are a product of your environment. But you have to forgive, you have to try to have some of that forgiveness for your parents and the family that you grew up with, because they only had the knowledge that they had.
Hmm.
Even if something else was presented to them to help them with growing or with the situation that everybody was in, it doesn't mean that they would have used that knowledge, because maybe they didn't have the capacity to take that new knowledge on that would have been better. And we have to forgive ourselves if we're blaming ourselves for the environment that our kids grew up in. Because again, we only knew what we knew.
Right.
And I know that sounds like an excuse to some people. We don't know what we don't know, but it's true. Can't we can't be better people if we don't know how to be better people.
Exactly. And this is so problematic. It's so unfortunate. There's a sort of a what is it called? A dialectic um, between understanding that we are all products of our environment and that we only have the tools we have in our toolkits, and we can't be mad at ourselves for not using the tool that we don't have. There's that on the one side, and then there's the idea of, well, something happened to me 50 years ago, and so that's my reason why I'm hurting you now. What can I do?
Right.
It's not either everything is the fault of my childhood or what's the opposite of that? I should take responsibility for everything I've ever done, regardless of my childhood. It's not
Mhm.
either or like that. I
Right.
think it's important to understand that we only have the tools we have, and then to say, and you can be sad about that. I mean, there's so much to be sad about for yourself, for your kids, if they experienced intergenerationally some of what you lacked as a child yourself. It's terribly sad. But what I want to avoid is blame and shame, because those are so destructive and not helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. I often told myself that it's not my fault what happened. It's not, I am a product of my environment, but it is also my responsibility to heal from it, to
Exactly.
to move on and to heal from it so that future generations don't have to continue on the same patterns.
Absolutely. Amen. Yeah, that responsibility is like the opposite side of the coin of blame. It's like a positive. But I feel like a lot of people are not in a position to be able to hear that without staying steeped in shame. Like, oh, I'm supposed to be taking responsibility, and I guess I'm not, and I'm bad. Um, it's such a hard problem.
It is. It is. And yeah, it's definitely something that we have to work at on a consistent basis. Um and just plant those seeds
Yeah.
that it's okay, we're going to have so many feelings around how we grew up, how we're raising our children. Um, it's just we're human beings, and being human is not easy by any means. By any means. I Yeah, I do want to touch on your other book, Reconnecting with Your Estranged Child, because as I told you before we came on, I read this because I loved constructive wallowing so much that I wanted to learn more. And estrangement runs in my family. Luckily, it does not run from me to my kids. It's more from my parents to my siblings. Um, but what this did was it helped me understand where my siblings are coming from, and it also gave me tools to have bigger conversations with my adult children, because I didn't have the, um, what's the word? I didn't have somebody show me how to have an adult relationship with your adult children, and this really helped me.
Great.
So, I wanna thank you for that, because I never really understood why my siblings don't talk to my parents, or why I have such a limited relationship with my parents. And this really helped to open up my eyes and open up my heart to those different ways of communicating with adults, period. Um, because oftentimes we treat our siblings um, and other adults in our life much like we did when we were teenagers or kids, because of how we grew up.
Yeah.
Um, so what brought you to writing this book? Is that more of your focus in your practice, or is it all of it?
Yeah. So estrangement, by estrangement, I just mean kind of a distant relationship between parents and adult children. I mean, any two people with a relationship could be estranged, but I do focus on parents and adult children, and that is the focus of my practice. It has been for probably more than 10 years now. And I fell into it entirely by accident. I was a new therapist and noticing that a number of my adult clients were talking about their parents as being people they didn't really want to spend a lot of time with. And I was listening to them, and I would ask, do your parents know that you feel this way? And often the answer was, I tried to tell them, but they don't get it, or I couldn't talk to them about this, they would be mad or something. So I thought, "Oh, gosh, these parents on the other side must just be tearing their hair out and, wondering what's going on." So that's how I kinda started. I wrote a little bit online and it just kind of snowballed as I realized how many parents were out there looking for answers as to why their adult children were estranged from them. And it culminated in my writing this book that came out in 2020, Reconnecting with Your Estranged Adult Children, because I wanted a book that said everything I wanted it to say and nothing I didn't want it to say. At the time, estrangement, that space was very, what's the word, polarized.
Yeah.
So either you were an adult child who you weren't talking to your parent. It still is, by the way.
Yeah, it is.
It's
It's very
very
big in the, what I've noticed, and probably because I'm part of that generation, but it's really big in the Generation X, uh, e area. Envi
yeah. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of polarization and us versus them in general in the world, and I just find that so discouraging because I don't see solutions there. If all we're doing is digging in our heels and saying, "Well, this new generation is so entitled," where do we go from there? How do we repair these relationships if indeed that's what we want? If we want to be closer to our kids who have stepped away. And I don't have an estranged adult children. I've got a stepdaughter who has not made that choice at this time, luckily. Um, but I sure have seen enough of it to have written about my clinical experience, my personal experiences talking with people estranged, and of course reading the research also for that book.
Yeah, it really did help me to, because I'm currently going through empty nesting. My son is actually moving out, the last one is moving out tomorrow. Um, and so it came at a good time because our kids are they're supposed to leave the nest. They're supposed to grow up and have their own families. And that's why, I mean, for me, it was, one of the reasons why I had children. But growing up and seeing the relationship between my parents and my siblings, I always knew that my kids were going to leave. I honestly didn't expect them to be around until they were 25, living at home, but I'm so glad that I got as long as I did. But it also showed me why sometimes parents feel that their kids don't include them in everything once they do leave the nest. Um, so this book really helped to open up my eyes and see that it's not them leaving the house it's not me. It's not about me. It's not about my husband. It's about them moving forward in their lives. And we are lucky enough to be taken along for the ride and kept in the loop as much as we are. Be, it's that's how I look at it, is that it's my joy to be a part of their lives. It was my job to grow them and you know, not virtually, but like kick them out of the nest and let them go off on their own. Birds do it all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, but, a lot of people have friends who are just thick as thieves with their adult children. They're always together and stuff like that, and so people compare themselves to these families and think, "Why don't I have that
Yeah.
when I really, really want that?" And there are complex forces at play. I mean, most of the parents I talk to understand that their kids need to leave the nest,
Mhm.
and to use another metaphor, they want their kids to be able to drive the car of their own lives, but the parent wants to be in the car. Even in the back seat, they just want to be a part of things. And that there's nothing wrong with wanting that. And in some cases of estrangement, the parents' need and expectation for that continuing relationship is problematic enough that it is kind of essential to the estrangement. In other cases, there are real relationship problems between the parent and the child that the parent may be less aware of than the adult child is.
Yeah.
And in many cases, the adult child has tried within themselves, perhaps unbeknownst to the parent, they've tried to be okay with certain dynamics in the relationship, and they just get to a point where they say, I can't do it anymore. And sometimes this is the first the parent has heard that there's a problem. It's quite heartbreaking, and because the shock is profound in the parent, and the pain is excruciating.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I've definitely seen it from both sides. Um, but I've also seen the child try to explain to the parent many times, and it's taken strong words to get it across sometimes.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's so much there's so much more to these conversations than just what we see on TikTok. The cheese.
Yes.
Um, but I can't thank you enough for writing both books and putting those seeds out there for people to access, because when I was looking for things, it was hard to find very simple techniques on how to feel your feelings again, how to understand your feelings. Um, and also there aren't very many books out there on, what to expect when you have an adult child.
Right.
Yeah, we have what to expect when you're expecting, but what to expect when you leave the nest.
That's right. And you notice how the two topics are not unrelated. These are both about emotions.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Tina, thank you so much for coming on. Is there anything else that you would like the listeners to know moving forward that you think would, a couple nuggets that you think would help them in moving forward?
Oh, this conversation, I feel like, has opened up just worlds of stuff to talk about. It's so hard to pinpoint anything in particular, but I guess one thing I do want to make sure I say, if people, especially, well, actually, just to everybody, that shame is so uh, universal. It's present in all of us. We all have some degree of shame that we carry about who we are. Um, to some degree, it's an artifact from childhood and being told that what we're doing is not good or not right. But shame is so normal, and it can be so destructive because it can get in the way of actually making changes that you want to see in your life. If you cannot, if your shame stands in the way of looking at things that you actually could change and experience differently, then you're truly enslaved by it. So if you experience feelings of shame, if you just feel bad within yourself sometimes, know that it's not because you're not lovable or not worthy or that you weren't a good parent or a good son or daughter. It's to some degree it is conditioning. Our society does condition shame into us. And there's also intergenerational stuff that you may be carrying. Um, so be super kind and gentle to yourself to the best of your ability and open to the idea that you may not be as bad as you sometimes feel like maybe you might be, and that you are pretty perfect the way you came into the world, and you deserve to get back there.
Absolutely. Everybody can find your books on Amazon. Um, where can they find more information about all of the other things that you have to offer? What is your website?
I've got a website in my name, tinagilbertson.com. And for parents who are unwillingly estranged, if you read the Reconnecting book and you like it, join me in my community. I have an online community called the Reconnection Club at reconnectionclub.com. We have a library of resources and we have live events that I host. So if you're looking for community and more education around estrangement, check out reconnectionclub.com. Oh, I also have a podcast called the Reconnection Club Podcast that anyone can listen to in your favorite podcast player app.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tina, for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Tina. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us on the Metamorphosis Project podcast. I hope today's episode brought you inspiration, joy, and a spark of empowerment. Remember, transformation is an incredible journey, and every single step you take towards self-care and healing brings you closer to the life you truly desire. If this episode uplifted you, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your support helps us to share this journey of hope, resilience, and joy with many listeners. For more tips, support, and inspiration, come and visit us at designyourexistence.com. Until next time, keep growing, keep healing, and keep shining brightly. You are absolutely worth every bit of love and care you give to yourself. Take care, stay joyful, and be well.